Hey everyone, good evening, good morning, depending on where you're joining me from. Are you able to hear me, see me clearly? I've had a change in my setup and I'm liking it a lot. Okay, then. Today is 31st Jan. We're almost done with a month in this year and a month of lives. This is a fourth live we are doing, and I'm so excited about doing this. I'm liking this a lot. If you are here, if you're watching, then do leave a comment, introduce yourself, let me know where you're joining me from. If you're not able to hear me, if there's some issue, let me know, and we will start soon. I'm just waiting for people to join in. Okay. Have you had a chance to look at what I'd like to cover today? I think you'll find it a little bit on the agenda also in the description of the video. Um, so there are a few things I want to cover. There are also a few questions that were asked on the previous lives. So I thought maybe I'll address those questions as well. So we're going to have an interesting conversation today. So I hope you'll stick around, share your thoughts, and let's see. For those of you who are listening to me for the first time, who are joining me live, or even watching this later for the first time, my name is Saujanya Vijayanagar. I am from Bangalore, India. I am a certified canine behavior consultant from Barks, run by Sindur Pangal. And I work with dog parents and help them understand their dog's behaviors, how to manage difficult situation, and I use the gentle parenting approach. So that's about me and why you should probably, or you could probably listen to me. And did I say? No, I didn't say. I am also the founder of Dog Promise. That's the name of my consulting bit, I guess. I don't like calling it a consulting business. So I'm yet to figure what what is the right terminology for it. Okay, so we have a few things on the agenda today. Uh, so let me just keep that in mind while we go through the conversation. Okay, so essentially the topics that I picked today were some of the questions I came across in the dog groups that I'm a part of, or in discovery calls that people have spoken to me when they have called me as prospective clients. So I thought maybe I'll address them. And there is one paper that I have been wanting to talk about. So I won't go into the detail of the paper and everything, but there was a screenshot that I had of the paper, and so I wanted to talk about it. And finally, I think there was something that I came across. Someone talk about this, of course, in the gentle parenting of children, and it said something about the difference between being safe and feeling safe. Um, so yeah, I thought I will uh, let's just chat about that and what my thoughts are about it, and what might be your thoughts about it if you have any, right? So that's the agenda. If you're here, if you're listening in, leave a hi, leave a comment, let me know you're here. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to take that up. If you have any thoughts about the things that I'm discussing, then share that in the comments and we can have a discussion here, and we will see where that goes. So the first topic for today was about counter surfing, right? So here was a question that I came across, and I found that very interesting because um, I also struggled with counter surfing with my dogs. So I think that I can bring in a little bit of my own personal experience to it. And then there's a lot of things that you need to unpack when you talk about counter surfing. So I want to talk about that as well. Um, so the question itself, let me just, I don't want to go through the question in detail, but I just wanted to bring in what was the topic particularly. And in fact, I even had a discovery call just a couple of days back, where the one who wanted to sign up for consultation also had the same concern of their dog having counter surfing problems with their dog. I'm hoping that you're aware what counter surfing is. If you're not, it's basically your dog trying to get whatever is there on the counters, kitchen counters specifically, and most likely these are food items. Um, and I feel like scavenging, picking things up on the road while walking, these are all kind of similar issues. And so I kind of bucketed all of them together, and I thought I'd talk about that. Um, so, have you had that issue with your dog um, at any point? That's the first question that I wanted to ask. Have you had an issue with counter surfing with your own dog? I have had. Sammy used to counter surf a lot, and he got quite intelligent about it. And we had to like keep upping our game as well. So that was the concern that we were also facing. But I'll come to Sammy soon, and we'll talk about it. But if you have you had an issue with your dog counter surfing, and share your thoughts, your struggles, your journey, if at all you've had that issue. In the meantime, did you all see the background? I'm quite excited about both of this. I hope you had a look at it and appreciate it. I'm enjoying this. I really like my setup now. So I hope you're also enjoying all of this. You're also enjoying sitting here at 7 p.m. Indian Standard Time. Um, and yeah, I'm enjoying this, and I'm hoping you enjoy it too. Uh, so there's one person, and I know who this is, but I'm going to protect their anonymity. Not with Joey, but with guests, dogs. Okay. And have you kind of like what has been your struggle there? Like, is boundary setting a struggle? Uh, have you probably tried to gauge why that's happening? Share your stories about that. So while you share your stories, I'll share what was our struggle with counter surfing and Sammy. So Sammy was a golden retriever, and we were always told, goldens and like Labradors are constantly hungry. So you know people bucketed his counter surfing or his excessive scavenging habits to a breed trait. um but I knew that this was not something he was I knew it was not normal for him to um, exhibit this level of hyperactivity and uh, trigger around food, right? And I was wondering how to help a dog who is getting this triggered around food, right? So with Sammy, it was always hungry, always hyper around food. I feel like he would switch off in terms of just being able to process the situation when food was involved. And then came the point of I think wherever there's food that he can find and access, then he would access it. So a lot of counter surfing was something that he would keep doing. Unfortunately, in the house that we used to live in before I got married, in my parents' house, we were we were not able to cordon off the kitchen area. It was an open kitchen and a very wide opening to the kitchen, which meant it got a little difficult to separate kitchen from, like, keep the dogs out of the kitchen. So Yeah, so we started struggling with counter surfing, and this particular post that I saw was also of a dog who was counter surfing. The client who called up, prospective client who called up, also was struggling with counter surfing. So it begs the question: why would dogs uh, indulge in this behavior? Is it normal? Is it not normal? If it's not normal, what can we do to help the dogs exhibiting this behavior? So I think I wanted to cover all of these things. If you have any questions when I'm sharing my thoughts, then please leave them and I'll try to answer them to the best of my ability. If not, I will go back, research, and come and share that with you here. And that's my commitment for every question that you ask. And if I'm unable to answer, I'll go back, research, and come back to you. Okay. So, um, first and foremost, I think we do have to understand where this behavior is coming from, right? In Sammy's case, and I have seen this in multiple dogs that I have worked with, my clients' dogs. I very distinctly remember another dog that I worked with who had counter surfing, food, hyperactivity around food, picking up things on the street while walking, and that dog had EPI. EPI is a gut issue. Basically, if I have to mm, explain it in easy terms, it's basically the dog's body is unable to absorb the nutrition, and so the dog is feeling hungry at all times. Even if you feed them the right kind of diet, even if you're feeding them enough amount of food, the behavior persists because they are having a health concern. um, there are classic markers of EPI. You can go and then research it. If you are unsure of doing that, you can DM me. We can have a chat, because I did do a lot of research around EPI, because I felt like Sammy had EPI, right? So that was the issue that one other dog had that I was consulting with, but same markers of behaviors, right? So health concern is something that we would have to really investigate. And sometimes uh, this comes up also when I have conversations with the clients, that when I say it's a health concern, um, the response is always, they're healthy, but unfortunately the kind of health issues that we're talking about here are not always easily diagnosable or not obvious in the first set of tests that we tend to do with our dogs. So it needs a lot more investigation. It needs a little bit of research from our end. It needs a little bit of digging up of the signs and symptoms that we are seeing for our dogs, and then pitching the case for our dogs and advocating for our dogs. So when I say health concern, we do need to put all of it together and then figure what's happening with our dog, right? So um Sammy also had a health concern, which was he had vitamin B12 deficiency. Um, that's the first level of test that you would do before you do the EPI test. So we did the B12. He had deficiency, and once we started giving him the supplements, he was doing much better in terms of his just general health. This was the last few months of his life. So health concerns, very important to address, and that can be one of the big reasons why your dogs are exhibiting this constant need to eat, counter serve, scavenge, eat things off the road, pick up things from, access whatever, sometimes even eat inedible items. So that could be one reason. So I would first, suggest my clients to rule out any health concern when it comes to counter surfing. Second, you would want to think about is nutrition, right? So first, in you don't think about nutrition initially, because if the dog is on good diet and still exhibiting counter surfing, then health is the problem. The dog is not on a species appropriate diet that this particular individual dog needs, then it's likely that the dog is looking for food, and looking for the nutrition that their body is asking for, and finding it wherever possible. Counter surfing, garbage dumps on the streets, picking whatever they can access on the streets. So right nutrition. And it's not just about species appropriate diet or raw kibble, um, fresh food. None of this. We're talking about what this individual dog needs, which is why we need to allow our dogs to give us feedback about what food and what diet and what nutrition they're looking for. I think a good person to um, look out for when you're having conversations about nutrition and food is Lucian Muttons, Surabhi from Lucian Muttons. She's here usually on our lives as well. You must have seen her in a couple of other lives. She's on my Instagram as well, so you can go and then find Lucian Mutton's nutrition and behavior, and you will find her. And she talks a lot about meeting your dog's nutrition needs. So that's the other bit, right? We do want to ensure that the dog is having no health concerns. We also want to ensure that the dog is being fed the food that the dog wants, right? So that's the second part. Now, third would be that probably your dog is having some scavenging needs. Now we know, and I think you can read up the book "What Is a Dog" by Raymond and Lorna Coppinger, and they talk about how dogs are scavengers. Um, and if your dog is a scavenger and their scavenging needs are not being met, then they are going to find it in whatever ways they can, through counter surfing, scavenging the garbage dumps, your garbage bins, or finding whatever they can on streets. So any questions till now? Any thoughts till now? How would we meet our dog's scavenging needs? I think the one way of doing it is um, your sniffing activities, treat search activities that can really help their needs for scavenging. Um, so that's one. And I think this is a good time to kind of address a question that came up in the previous live, where I think if you've not seen it, then I do suggest go and then watch it. And I think we were talking about walks and boundaries on walks and dog led walks and things like that. And I think there was a point where I mentioned that with Zoe, I do set a boundary when there are garbage dumps, or actually garbage bins, when we go on walks. And the question or the comment on that video was why the boundary around garbage dump, and isn't it part of the natural behavior to scavenge and then sniff around? um, so why the boundary, right? I felt like it was a great question. So I thought I'll just bring it up here as well. And then I think I've responded to that comment there, but I thought I'll bring it up here too. um, so first and foremost, I think normally when we are walking and there's a garbage dump and my dogs have found something from the dump and in their mouth, uh, if it's a food item, uh, I don't tend to pluck it out of their mouth. Because what's the worst that can happen? Maybe loosies, maybe vomiting. And I make sure that we walk when there are no poisoned food around, um, when there's no poisoned food, and I know that our neighborhood is more or less safe, there's no poisoned food lying around for dogs. So barring all the risks and hazards and having accounted for it, knowing that it's all healthy, food, and what's the worst that can happen? Loosies, we tend to have it too, and have bad tummies often. So it's okay. So I don't tend to pluck it out of their mouth, because doing that, and I've done it with Sammy, where we would like go on the streets and then he would pick up something and we'd like get it out of his mouth. And not only is it stressful, but in the long term it can lead to food insecurity, to a point where the dog can start gulping down and swallowing inedible items. And that is what happened with Sammy also. And we had to it took us a while to build that food security again, so that he is not insecure around the food items, and doesn't feel the need to like swallow or gulp tissues and plastic and whatnot. So it can become a lot more difficult in the long run, whereas a chapati on the road side, it's easier to let go. um, so that's important. But of course, if you feel like it's unsafe, if you feel like the food items that are lying around in your neighborhood are not safe, in terms of it can become fatal, because there have been recent stories where some of the dogs have died of poisoned food. um, I would be careful. Be aware of your surroundings, be aware of your neighborhood neighbors, and only then uh, exercise this kind of uh, freedom, right? But coming back to the point of uh, by the boundary around garbage dumps, with Zoe, she would get very fixated just about garbage dumps, scavenging. And Zoe, I have to give you a context. She is a beagle, and she is, even without the beagle part, she's very, very smart. But also, she can get fixated about something that she's interested in. So the garbage dumps would then not allow for the kind of walks that we would hope for. And that is why I would set a boundary. That I think there's a picture of our walk a few years back where Zoe is sniffing a poop by another dog or something. And um, I think that was how I would let them sniff, because I'm pretty sure that they're quite aware of what to eat, what not to eat. I have the confidence on my dogs, because they are fairly well regulated, barring certain situations and certain triggers. And we just manage those situations if it comes up. So the garbage bins are one such um, you know um, triggers, right, where she can get very fixated. So yeah, that was a question that was asked elsewhere. So normally I would, if a dog wouldn't get fixated, if a dog would not get is able to think and process the situation. Basically, I see this with a lot of our street dogs, where they tend to like surf the garbage bins, and they know, like, okay, this is like food item, this is, I can walk away from it if I want to. That's a sign of an individual who is able to process the situation. And if your dog is unable to in a particular given situation, then it's a good idea to draw boundaries or not encounter that situation repeatedly, because they are not getting, especially in walks. That the question was in context of walks. I'm talking about in context of walks, that we would avoid those situations, because the walk was meant for her to explore, and she wouldn't be doing it if she was fixated about one particular thing. So yeah, that was a question in the previous video. um, okay. And there is a one last thing about counter surfing that I wanted to address. So if you have, you know, um, checked for health, and you have checked for, um, you know, uh, diet, you have also ensured that it's now about habit, right? Could it be a habit? Now, how do you ensure that a dog who has picked up a habit uh, does not continue to engage in that habit, right? You would do that by ensuring you do not allow for the opportunity to engage in that habit, right? In the case of counter surfing, the habit here is getting into the kitchen, looking for something on the counter, and stealing the food, right, or getting the food, right? So if that is a habit, how would you create a break from that habit, or create a space where you don't allow for the opportunity to engage in that habit? And I think what we did initially with Sammy, and Zoe was not tall enough to counter surf, so she would try to open the refrigerator or cabinets. um, but for Sammy, we would like clear out the counter so there's nothing to access. And then we would, the moment he would access something, then we will have to like clear it out a little further and a little further. So I think not allowing for that opportunity to engage in that behavior is quite critical, in when you're trying to break a habit. And this is specifically in case of habit alone, or where they're trying to engage in the scavenging behavior, because their scavenging needs are not being met. So this wouldn't apply, if it's health concern. If it's a health concern, irrespective of whether you allow the opportunity or don't allow the opportunity, the need remains, because there's a health concern. If it is nutrition deficiency, the need remains, irrespective of the irrespective of what kind of boundaries you're setting. So it's important to meet the needs that are underlying these behaviors before you try and then break it, in terms of a habit, right? Before we assume it's a habit, it's important to look at what is the need or what is the underlying concern, right? So I would first eliminate all of this before pinning it down to a habit. And if it is habit, then we would want to set boundaries. And in case of kitchen garbage bins in your own house, then you have to set hard boundaries, right? When I say hard boundaries, um, you would want to just not allow them in the kitchen, right? So we once I got married and moved to the home with my husband, we had a kitchen, baby gate. It was a hard boundary. There was no way they could enter. um, and that's it. We didn't allow for that opportunity to engage in that behavior at all. So that is what I would advise. Again, this is looking at counter surfing with whatever you know um, factors affect counter surfing, but we need to remember that a stressed dog is not going to be thinking rationally, so they might access food. Stress eating, a lot of humans engage in stress eating, and dogs can do that too. So if they're stressed, then wanting to eat could be another reason for counter surfing. There could also be a dog who is unable to be rationally processing their situation. It could be that food is the only way that the human connects with the dog, so maybe food has an association with it. There could be a lot of reasons for counter surfing, but to look at it in isolation, the few things that could affect this behavior is health, nutrition, the scavenging needs of this particular species that we're talking about, habit formations that we tend to see in our dogs, and stress, right? So stress can affect the way they are able to deal with and understand the situations. Okay. Is there a behavioral aspect to asking, because while Joe never did this before, she has recently started sleeping only when she's alone with tempting food like bacon. Maybe she likes bacon, right? Or maybe, as I said, scavenging, right? It depends on how. What I would then think about is, if she likes this as part of food, would I want to introduce that in her meals, right? And how much would I want to introduce? What is she looking for in the meals? um, I would probably address it in that manner. When you say behavioral aspect, all of this is behavior, but what is affecting the behavior, right? Sometimes it could just be fun, right? It could be something to engage with, and the way they're engaging with their environment could be by counter surfing. So in that case, would you want to break the habit by placing a baby gate? That would be an interesting way to address the situation. So I'd try these two things, changing up the diet a little bit, maybe adding little bacon in the food, and then see how she responds, or adding baby gates so that there is no opportunity to engage in the behavior, as long as you have eliminated the idea that it is not a health concern. Even if she was not doing before, and if she has developed it recently, it could still, I mean, I'm not saying it is a health issue, but we wouldn't want to be fully ruling it out if at all there are other symptoms in sight, right? And I know we are connected on Instagram, so we can have a longer chat about this specifically. um, we had a feeling that she's picking up this habit from her friends who she spends time with few days a week. Yeah, I mean, uh, did I update you about the three dogs that who keep coming in and out? So Lady, Laddu, and Bala. Lady was the one who first learned to jump in and out, and she learned it on her own. Whereas Laddu and Bala, I feel, have picked it up from her. So they saw her do it multiple times, and then they picked it up. So Laddu did it, and then Bala did it very recently. So they could be picking it up from each other as well. It could be something that they do socially together. Also, we have to remember that dogs tend to do scavenging as a group too. So you can think about that as well. Is that a group activity that they have learned to do together? um, Worth figuring it out. Is muzzling dogs on walks recommended if there's a risk of contaminated food? I don't use muzzles and I don't recommend muzzles either. What you can do is just skip those places. Which is why I think when you do safaris, when you do walks for your dogs, it is very critical to know where you're walking your dog and what kind of environment, what kind of surroundings it is. And while muzzling might just manage the situation, manage the behavior, we are not essentially able to understand where your dog is. Have they stopped scavenging? Are they continuing to do scavenge food? Are they able to walk away, right? These are things you're not able to gauge when they're muzzled, right? So a good idea might just be to skip the places. So for example, you don't even have to skip the entire neighborhood or wherever you see food. For example, as soon as we exit our house, on the opposite side we have our neighbor's house. They keep their bins right outside their gates, and then when we take a right, and in the corner there's another house where they keep the bins outside. All we do is we don't walk on that side of the road, right? You just have to like cross the road and then go to the other side. That's as good as that's also enough. When we used to walk in my parents' place, as soon as we exited the apartment complex, there was garbage dump on the left side where we would walk our dogs, and so we would never go onto the left side. As soon as we exited, we would walk on the right side, and then we would walk freely, right? So it's just about knowing your surroundings to ensure that you don't encounter the triggers, and in this case the trigger is contaminated food. This is my mother, and she's talking about the rat poisons we used to have in our apartment complex. And I agree that, which is why we need to be very careful about where your dogs are sniffing, what they are finding on their walks, and just be aware. I feel so. I was recently seeing this person. I think I've mentioned this even in our last live as well, or I don't remember. Was it the last live or the other Ponder Club event that we had, where I would see this person who was walking their dog and they're constantly on their phone. And in that situation, um, how are we going to be aware of our surroundings, whether a trigger is approaching our dogs, whether or not our dogs are communicating something to us and the others around in their surroundings? How would we manage that situation if we are so engrossed in other things like phones? So I think being aware um, and vigilant about the boundaries, about the surroundings, I think is the best way. And it's very critical because you're outdoors, you don't know what might creep up, you don't know what might come up. Um, so it's always good to ensure that you know what's going on. What's the best way to set boundaries with recently adopted adult dogs who have lived in shelters with less or no boundaries? Uh, so even in my sessions, I don't talk about boundaries till about fourth or fifth session, I think. The reason being that, and I think I spoke about this is a good point because it talks about one of the recent posts I made about, if you want your dog to respect your no, you need to tell them yes first, right? I think that was my post recently, and I told that I'll talk about it a little on in the live. So I think to talk about boundaries, first you need to talk about a lot of other things. What are these other things that you need to talk about? So, for example, with the counter surfing, before we start setting the boundaries, what did we speak about? We spoke about the needs. What is possibly happening biologically, socially, psychologically for them that is probably making them engage in that behavior. So I think I would first look at that. What are the needs? What are the unmet needs? Stuff like that. So that's first. Look at the factors that are affecting the behavior, address those factors, address the needs of this individual uh, dog. That would be first, right? Next, you have to build a good relationship with this dog, right? Now we are trying to do um, a consent based or a respectful boundary, which means that it's going to be firm boundaries, but it is not going to be through force, right? Which means that your dog should be able to respect you, and you have to respect the dog. You have to build that trust between the two of you, right? That requires a lot of connection, bonding. It requires understanding each other. It requires us to give our dogs as much agency and choice as possible, um, because the more they feel like they're respected, the choices are respected, the more they're probably ready to listen to us, right? So I would look at first the needs, I would look at where the behavior is coming from, build the relationship, do a lot of reassurance, build the connection between us and the dog, and only then come to the conversation around boundaries. What happens is that when I talk about boundaries and how to set boundaries in such a situation, people take away how to set the boundaries without doing the groundwork. And the groundwork is important, groundwork is necessary, because if I don't meet the need, if I don't build the right kind of relationship, if I don't respect my dog, then there is no reason why the dog should listen to me, right? So I think it's important to think about these things before we look at boundary. With boundaries, I think there was a very nice video I had shared with me and Zoe in it. I will try and then dig it up and then share it on the comments here, post the live, which is basically she was trying to get into my wardrobe, and I didn't want her to get into my wardrobe because it had a lot of things, and then some things that are valuable to me, some things that could be hazardous for her. And so boundary setting was necessary. How did I do that in that situation? So firstly, by that time we were, you know, constantly building our relationship. I was respecting her, she would trust me. So there was a lot of this going on by that time already. So we were, that was a tick. In that situation, she was trying to get into the wardrobe, which meant that she was trying to sniff something, explore, look at whatever was there. So instead of offering my wardrobe, I offered her another basket where she could sniff things around, and I didn't set a boundary there. So I told her a yes to that particular basket and sniffing that particular basket, instead of allowing her to sniff my wardrobe, right? So I was giving her other choices, other avenues to exhibit the same behavior, but not where she was accessing. I think there's a great video, and then there's a little bit of body language involved. I think body language is the easiest part of that entire situation. It's the groundwork that we need to be building first, right? So I think that is what I would look at before um, the body language, right? So what's the groundwork? What's the need of the dog? If you're telling that the dog has lived in shelters and has been recently adopted, which means that lots of stress, maybe history of abandonment, some trauma, maybe no attachment figure yet, no connection with a particular individual. M- in shelter environments, as much as most of the shelters try to do their best for their dogs, they are obviously stretched in their resources, which means that every individual dog's needs cannot be met to the capabilities of someone who's able to do it at home. uh, this is nothing to call out for shelters, not their shortcoming. It is just how short they are on resources and how difficult it is. I mean, even in our own homes, if we have multiple dogs, it becomes hard to meet the needs of multiple dogs. So I would imagine it's really stressful in a shelter environment, which means that this particular dog may not have had a lot of needs met, may have been in stressful situations, may have had past trauma. I would first work on these things, and with boundaries, I would just, wherever you are able to put hard boundaries in terms of just shutting doors, no access, dog proofing the house. Those are the best ways to start. I don't really know what exactly you're talking about for which situation you need the boundary, but first we have to look at the needs of the dog and build the relationship, and then work on the boundaries. I hope that was um, okay. So, what was the next topic I wanted to talk about? So, there was another. So, we spoke about counter surfing, um, and scavenging, picking things up from the road. So, all of this, I would probably look at the things that I said, which is basically health, diet, scavenging needs, and habit. Right. So, those are the four things that I would look at while addressing this particular behavior. Right. Um, the next question that I had was, someone had posted this thing saying that high energy reactive puppy, and I'll address both of it, like high energy and reactive. But what kind of got me thinking was how quickly we tend to label such a young dog, like a young puppy, as reactive. I feel it's so unfortunate to burden such a young dog with a label like reactivity when they're just entering the world, exploring the world, and just figuring out the world around them. So I think um, the reactive bit, caught my eye, and I've heard this quite a few times. Um, I think just a few weeks back, I had another discovery call with another potential client who said that they are having a reactive, aggressive puppy. I've seen this in so many dog groups and so many posts about puppies, and the word they use is aggressive puppy, reactive puppy, and it is so unfortunate to be labeling our dogs when they're so young, as young as 3 4 months old. uh, I have a friend, she's a rescuer, and she's fostering a street dog puppy. We've been messaging the last 2 3 days, and she was talking about how this dog has moved from one foster care to another. Why is the dog in foster care? Because the other puppy lost their life on the streets. The mama dog has gone for spaying, and so she is in foster care in a home waiting to get adopted. But she is so restless and she is so overwhelmed. She is having severe separation anxiety from the mama. She is missing, she's grieving the loss of her sibling. She's in an environment that is not familiar to her, and she's already moved 4 homes. uh, and she is constantly nipping, and she's being quite, in normal terms people would say she's being very difficult to handle. And my friend was like, I can see she's struggling, I can see that she's so restless, she's struggling, she's missing her mama, she's already bounced off foster homes, uh, and she's nipping. The stealing also as part of being a puppy. But I mean, it would be so unfortunate that without this background, you would end up, terming this dog as reactive or aggressive. There's an added layer which my friend mentioned, that the dog could be having some kind of pain because she's constantly, like, nipping on one particular spot on her hips, and she's not letting her touch near the hips and stuff like that. So could be pain too at such a young age. And without really understanding what are the different factors contributing to a behavior, are your dog's needs being met, At the puppy stage, is she getting enough rest? She's already moved so many homes that she doesn't know whom to turn to as a caregiver figure. Her mama is not around, and she's lost her sibling, so there's that emotional pain she's going through. There could be physical pain. She's not able to rest. She's in a new environment every few hours probably, or every day. uh, she is so overwhelmed, not able to rest. She's being fed decently now. um, and then to be called reactive at that age, it's quite unfortunate. So that's one thing that I wanted to bring up, that whenever someone calls their dog reactive, um, puppy especially, such a young dog, it's so important to remember what all they have already gone through before coming into our homes. Even without a traumatic history like this puppy that I'm mentioning, even without that, separation from your mother is emotional pain. It is very painful. And your dog comes into your home carrying that pain, not having a mother to look towards, not having anyone that they can lean on 24/7. Because a mama dog, especially we have seen this with street dogs quite a bit, they are there all the time, they're protecting the puppy. um which we humans are unable to do. In fact, my friend said that I'm meeting her connection needs as much as I can, but I can't do what the mama dog can. And it's so important to remember that when your dog comes into your home, they're already coming in with a lot of emotional pain, whatever, whether they've had a traumatic history or not. And in that sense, to call that dog reactive without understanding what has been the history, I think is quite an unfortunate burden for the dog to carry, not just then, but for the entire lifetime. So I think that caught my eye. So I thought I wanted to like talk about it, because I've heard it quite a few times now that my puppy is reactive, my puppy is reactive, where all they're trying to say is my puppy is being unmanageable, as puppies are, and they're teething and nipping everything, right? So I think it's uh, important to call out that they're being a puppy, and we didn't anticipate what being a puppy meant, um than calling them reactive. Now, high energy puppies, very interesting, right? Because studies show, we have seen that puppies need a good 20 hours of sleep, um, but they're being high energy. So, how do we then it feels almost counterintuitive. But I think Jamie's story is something that I keep repeating all the time for everybody who comes up with this conversation, and I feel like that's one thing that's overlooked quite a bit when it comes to dogs and puppies, is how much sleep they're getting. And with Jamie, and what happens with puppies is when they're nipping, um, at people, nipping at furniture, nipping at things, we are constantly assuming, if we are aware, we are constantly assuming it's a teething need and need something to chew on and bite on. And we're constantly trying to provide for that, which is great. But we're not looking at what else might be happening. And Jamie's story was really interesting, because that's what Jamie taught me, to not just assume that a puppy nipping is teething issue, right? So Jamie was our office dog. I think this was in 2019, 20, around that period. And he was around 4 months old. I'm assuming, we are assuming, because he was a street dog puppy. So he was probably 4, 5 months old, and he was constantly like nipping at us and like biting at us. And we would, you know, I would have scratches on all my hands, and I would have to do work like how I'm sitting right now, but he would be at my feet, not letting me work. And I'd have to like pick up my legs and then sit on the chair, like with my legs on the chair, uh, where he can't access my legs. And I would have to wear socks, and I'd have to wear like full jacket so that I'm not having bruises. That's how much he was nipping us. And we couldn't figure out what was happening. And we did obviously, give him chews. We gave him things to like bite on to just meet the teething needs. But um, I feel like what we ignored was that the environment he was in was very overstimulating. There were a lot of people. There was like food smell constantly because we were in a food food making business or whatever. So there was food being cooked all the time, and so there's a lot of like interesting smell. There are people, so he's constantly stimulated, and in my opinion, overstimulated, and he barely got to rest. So when Sindur, me, and a few other people, we just sat in and we were just discussing and then brainstorming about what could be happening, and we realized that he's probably not sleeping at all. And especially in those hours when the kitchen was operational. So that's about 7:38 in the morning up until about 4:30 in the evening. That's a long duration of not sleeping and being active constantly, which meant that he was frustrated, he was sleep deprived, he was irritable, he was overstimulated, and his nipping was coming from that, the fact that he was overwhelmed, overstimulated, and he was not getting enough sleep. The moment we realized this, we decided that we're going to take him to a separate space in the office, and someone's going to sit with him while we work. He's sleeping and he's away from this kind of overstimulating environment. And it was almost overnight that he stopped nipping. It stopped overnight. We didn't change anything else apart from giving him extra rest. So when we think about high energy puppies, I think it's important to think about what are the different needs, what are the needs that are being unmet. uh, are are they feeling safe? Are they you know are they having someone to as an attachment figure? Are all of their food, shelter, elimination needs being met? So it's important to think about all of this, um, because what happens is when we see a high energy puppy, we feel like they need to be active or they want to be active, and so we continue to create one activity after another for them without realizing that actually what they may be needing is rest, and how to allow for rest. So I think it's important to consider that. It's also important, I think, Sindur also talks about it in her book Dog Nose, and I think even Tura talks about it in her book with Stephanie. Uh, and they talk about how having stimulation for a dog in the puppy phase needs to be very minimal and short bursts. But what we end up doing with puppy socializations, puppy enrichment, or introduction to new things is we do too many things at once, because we are also overexcited and we are quite overjoyed about this new family member. So I think it's important to consider quality and at what pace we are introducing these things to our dogs. Are they even ready to take it in, and how long they can sustain this? So it's important to think about these things as well. Luckily, I just very recently made a handbook guide for what do puppies need. If any of you want to access it, or if you want to share it with your clients or people that in your circle, then DM me, we can chat about it, and then I can share link or even a code that you can share with people and they can download it from there. Okay, so that was about grief. And separation is very real. My dog recently lost his treaty friend. His emotional dysregulation was the most intense I've ever experienced. Absolutely. I think uh, even in the human world, we don't understand grief well enough to talk about it, to support people and our family members, our friends who are dealing with grief. And I am absolutely not surprised that people don't understand grief in dogs. Um, in fact, after Sammy passed away, Zoe was absolutely not like, I think she and I had a very similar coping mechanism, which was disassociation from like what's happening. And I think uh, I was hoping that she's the one who's going to wake us up in the morning to like feed her and take care of her. And instead, she would sleep, and she was sleeping like till 2 p.m., 3 p.m., not asking for anything. And I would continue to sleep too. And I think both of us ended up having very similar coping mechanism when we lost Sammy. So I think I'm very sorry for your dog's loss and the emotional dysregulation. Uh, I mean, I wish we understood a lot more about grief, just in general, and then in animals. I think people don't give animals enough credit to the amount of emotional intensity they can have. I had a puppy that was protective of food right off the bat at 45 days. She was adopted from the street. Do you have any anecdotes or similar experiences with this? Uh, I haven't seen. Um, I mean, in my experience, and again, when I say like, I want to be very clear that with street dogs, and especially, uh, the kind of street dogs we see in India, there very little research on them. So, it is good to take in the experiences we have and then look at it from that angle, because it will only give us insight into one lived experience, right? And the fact that if this is a lived experience for one person, it is a possibility. I wanted to take it from that point of view. But I have personally not seen a dog be protective of food at that age, but I wouldn't be surprised if they are, because if they were competing for the mother's milk, if they were competing for the food that was given to them by other caretakers, human caretakers, it could be, something that they're experiencing even at that young age. And at that young age, the dogs do need just safety, mother, litter, food, right? These are literally what they're looking for to survive at that young age. And if they're not getting that basic need, they could start getting insecure about food at that young age. I think it's worth also thinking, and I think Robert Sapolsky talks about it in his book, Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcer. And he talks about how stress can be passed on from the mother to the pup. Of course, he's taken an example of other animals and maybe even humans, but stress can be transferred from the mother to the child, the young one, when the young one is in the womb, but the mother is stressed, right? And I think that's another thing to consider. If the mother was not fed well, if the mother was not taken care of, uh, in a uh, not taken care of by anybody, if she was fighting for food, if she was food insecure, it may be worth wondering and going down the route of asking questions like, could it be from mother to the pup at birth, right? So maybe that's worth asking. I know it's not a direct question, I mean, answer to your question, but it's a good one. And I think if I do come across any studies in the meantime, I will share it in the next live. Chandni says, my heart goes out to pups because of the expectations humans have of them, because many feel that if the pup doesn't learn young, they'll never learn. True. First of all, hello. Hi. How are you doing? We need to chat soon. But yeah, thank you for coming and, leaving this comment. And I do agree. One of the cases that Chandni and I worked on was a pup. I think when we were working together, she was a pup at that time. Uh, but I also feel like there is not enough information for dog parents to access, because even when I brought in my dogs, the only thing that I was aware of is that if you don't get your dogs trained quickly at a young age, then your dogs wouldn't learn and they would get too old to learn anything. And the hyper focus was on training. So it was quite unfortunate that we didn't have any other information. And by luck or by chance, I came across Sindoor, and then I didn't go on that path. But it's not the case with so many, because they're overwhelmed by information around training and starting very young. So I think it's quite unfortunate for dogs, and I'm hoping that more of us who can speak about this, more of us who can advocate for our dogs and educate people around us, it can make a big difference. Yes, my analysis was separated from mother at less than 30 days. Specifically, food was meat. My other dogs would avoid at all costs. Yeah, I mean, this is the thing, right? Like separated at such a young age. I think and I'll bring up this study also because I remember reading it somewhere that we have seen this in Indian context, and I think the study was also on Indian street dogs, that you don't tend to see dogs leave their mothers uh, this young. I think they stay on for 6 months and sometimes even a year. If at all they leave only after that point. So they don't leave that young at all, which means that we're separating puppies from their mothers so early on when they actually need the mother's caregiving a lot more. Uh, and that can have long term effects, right? And we don't realize that. um, and I wish a lot more people spoke about it. A lot more people spoke about emotional pain. A lot of us spoke about the trauma of being separated. I think there was one post I think we all made on Bombard Dogs. Bombard Dogs is a page that Sindhu, I, and a few other people manage together, and that had a post on why we don't support breeding, but it comes we did bring up this point of separating the dog from the mother, and it is not a natural process. It doesn't occur in the nature. We don't see it happening, which means that it can cause a lot of emotional trauma for our dogs when they're as young puppies as even 30-45 days. Thank you for sharing the story of this pup. I think it was a good conversation around that, and an important one at that, I think. Okay. Are you guys up for a longer live today? We still have a couple of topics to cover. Um, and I think I would love to, talk about the paper and the other bit. So if you're up for more conversations, I am not. I can go on, and I would love to. So if you're up for listening, we can continue as well. And in the meantime, I'll take this comment. I hope we can discuss how to help dogs cope with grief and trauma. I tried many things, but interested to hear your thoughts too. Uh, this is a difficult one, right? Because I feel like we haven't, with trauma, we still probably can talk about it, but grief is so much more. Um, it's such a strong emotional experience, and it requires a lot more understanding of grief. It has phases. Probably even trauma too, but I think grief is a little more complicated. With trauma, whenever I deal with cases with trauma, first and foremost we try and then work on safety, and that safety could be basically uh, feeling safe when in an environment where they're not going to um, encounter the triggers or the one that their stressors or what caused them trauma. And I think it starts from there: safety and decompression, space, relationship. I think these are like very important concepts first. Um, I think there is this paper that I was reading, and I thought I'll bring it up here, but I needed a little more time in kind of sitting on that paper and reading it a little bit, and that was on active avoidance. So you can look it up too, and then you can read, and then we can come and have a chat about this in the next time. Um, and active avoidance is something that was introduced early 1900s, then it went out of fashion, and then apparently it's come back into the mix in psychology when you're talking about anxiety. So active avoidance when dealing with anxiety. We talk about active avoidance quite a bit in our Bach's way, and how I deal with it when it is clients' dogs and my own dogs, and for myself as well. I'm someone who has social anxiety, and there was a period when I was fully dysregulated, and I was going into this maladaptive ways of dealing with things, with stressors. And I realized that it was first important for me to figure out how to navigate life while trying to stay away from things that were making me dysregulated. And doing that firstly sounds counterproductive, right? You think about, like, if you keep avoiding the stressor, how are you going to get over it or deal with it? But it gives our brain some break from the stressor that we're talking about, and we can come back fresh after decompressing. um, and when we're able to cope, when we're able to think through better, and I think that is that is quite valuable, because the brain then gets um, learns new ways to deal with the triggers. So active avoidance is something that I would probably encourage you to read about. I will also read about. I was reading the paper that talks about active avoidance. The paper was by Joseph Ledoux, I think. And you can go in and look that paper up. I would also want to like read the paper and discuss it at some point, because that's how I would address cases of trauma, anxiety, fear, because a lot of us have the tendency to get our dogs used to the triggers, so that they don't have behavior responses that show anxiety or fear, uh, or trauma. But I think active avoidance is a good way to go about it, so we can discuss that in the next session. And of course, the other things that I would probably do in a case for trauma is create safety. And I think that active avoidance comes with, like, under safety too, and also building relationship and trust, um, and meeting whatever needs have remained unmet in the past period. With grief also, I think with Zoe, we didn't I mean, with grief, how can you do anything else, right? You can't do anything much other than support the needs of the dog and just be there with them through that situation, help them cope in whatever way they can. What I've seen helps a lot with grief, and I think we have seen this with humans, is uh, if you're doing it alone, it feels a lot more difficult to navigate grief, and even trauma. I think it's very difficult to do it alone. So I think having someone, leaning on to someone supporting you, is a big factor. And I think that's what I mean by safety, support, and attachment, and connection. So I think those are the few things that I would think about, and we can have a more detailed conversation next time. I'll also read up on the paper, and we can probably discuss that. Does that sound fair? um, and does that answer your question slightly, at least in some ways? Let me know. um, okay, so the next thing on the agenda was the paper, if I remember correctly. Yes. So this was an interesting paper that I came across, which was, the name of the paper. I'll let you know the name of the paper. The rest, I think, you can find it. It's on available on Google Scholar. It's available free on. It's called "Dog Moms Use Authoritative Parenting Styles." I hope uh, you could hear that. So it's called "Dog Moms Use Authoritative Parenting Styles." And I wanted to discuss this a little bit. I will bring up the screenshot in a minute, but let's just go over a few terms that we need to know. So authoritarian parenting is basically, um, what is defined. I'll thank you for putting that up on the, yeah, correct. So this is the, yes, this is the name of the paper. So authoritarian parenting is minimal connection and nurturing, and authoritarian, I hope I said authoritarian. So authoritarian parenting is minimal connection and nurturing, high demands from the child or dog, or whatever, in our case dog, but child. These are terms that have been used in child directed parenting. Authoritative is high demands, but also high nurturing, right? I hope the distinction between the two is clear. Uh, Now, a lot of people also say that gentle parenting is the same as authoritative parenting. But as I was sitting through and researching about um, gentle parenting or authoritative parenting, authoritarian parenting, I realized that gentle parenting is not the same as either of them. It's not authoritative, it's not authoritarian for sure. That we knew. It's not permissive either, and it's not unavailable kind of parenting too. So, what is gentle parenting? It's quite interesting. So, it is similar to permissive and authoritative in the sense that there is high connection and high nurturing. So that's obviously there. But clearly, when you say high demand, it means that you have certain set of expectations, and your dog or your child needs to meet that expectation. So I think that is where gentle parenting is different, in the sense that I think when you say high demand, the demand is for compliance of certain rules. The rules could be arbitrary, it could make sense, whatever it is, but compliance is necessary. In authoritarian style of parenting, the compliance is through punitive measures or punishments, and there is no nurturing also. In authoritative, the compliance is through guiding, is what I have learned till now in terms of the differentiation. Now, with gentle parenting, uh, compliance is not a feature, because relationships cannot be based on compliance. So if it's a relationship based parenting and relationship is in the center of parenting, then compliance cannot be the topmost priority. There are rules, there are boundaries, but the rules and boundaries, like I said in earlier in this live, come after trying to understand the individual in question. And in our case it's the dog. In parenting, human parenting case, it is the child. So you understand the individual, you understand where their behaviors are coming from, you also understand their level of skills and abilities, you understand what kind of situations are not conducive for them to, for that we have certain expectations of them. So for example, if a toddler is being taken to a mall, and the mall is quite overwhelming, overstimulating, and if the toddler tends to have a meltdown, it's important to understand that the meltdown seems very an appropriate response to the environment, because the toddler currently does not have the skills to cope with this kind of a stressful environment. So, in authoritative parenting, I'm guessing that the expectation is that the toddler has to behave well, and the parent teaches them how to. In authoritarian, there is a lot of like punishment, scolding, yelling to get the child to behave in a certain manner. In gentle parenting, there is understanding. There's also there's also um, co-regulation, which means that if your toddler is having a meltdown, you don't leave them to handle it on their own. So you're sitting with them, you're working through the situation with them, offering them different options as solution, while obviously maintaining boundaries. So that is how gentle parenting looks like, and it can be very confusing, because we don't often see gentle parenting in our day to day lives. It's not something that we have seen someone model it for us. We have not seen a frame of reference for gentle parenting. So it becomes very difficult to understand what it is, and it almost seems like gentle parenting and authoritative are similar. Sounds like rewards are a form of nurturing in authoritative. Yeah, it seems like that. So basically, we spoke about this in the discussion that we did in the Ponto Club about our rewards positive. It is on my page, it is on my channel, you can go and find that video too. And we spoke about how, and I'm going to make this a very controversial statement, but if you feel triggered by the statement, share what are the feelings that come up with for you, because it can be quite triggering. The controversial statement that I wish to make is that I feel like rewards and punishments are sort of the two sides of the same coin, which means that what I'm trying to say is that the goal of both approaches seems to be the same, which is you want one individual to behave a certain way, and how you do it differs, right? The goal remains the same. I have also seen a lot of people say that because rewards and reinforcements are being used, it automatically means that there's a good relationship between the human and the dog, or the parent and the child. Sindur made this great statement, and I love it. I'm going to use it as my analogy everywhere. And that is, just because your boss pays you $1 million does not mean you and your boss have a good relationship. It just means that your boss is paying you for what you do and for complying with your role and responsibility. That doesn't really mean you have a good relationship with your boss. That requires something else altogether. And just because there's rewards in the mix does not mean does not automatically mean good relationship. um, so I think the paper, this is the one. Can you see what I'm showing here? I myself can't see, sorry. I'll have to change the thing a bit. Yeah. No. Is this better? I think this is better. So this is a screenshot from that paper. So if you go to the paper, you will see this at one point in the paper. So they are trying to kind of compare what parenting style is what kind of training method, right? So you will see that authoritarian parenting is equated to dominance theory and traditional training. Focus on control, physical correction, and punishment, expectations that learners should know better. uh, the problem with this is when we don't know, uh, we dogs do have cognitive abilities that we are not fully aware of yet, and we don't give them full credit for their cognitive abilities. But in stressful situations, in certain developmental phases, our dogs are not able to fully exercise their cognitive abilities. The other thing that is important to remember is that our dog might want to do something else altogether, whereas what we are asking of our dog is something else altogether. So I feel like this idea that our dogs should know better, they do know quite a bit about themselves, like how we are also born. And there is this, we're born with, we were taught that we are born with five senses, but we are born with eight senses, if I'm right. And interoception is one such sensory, system in our body. And that means that that is a particular system that uh, teaches us how our body is feeling internally. So if you're feeling hungry, and you're able to recognize that you're feeling hungry, that is interoception at work, right? uh, and we are all born with this sense. So if our dog knows better, they do know what they want, but their interoception has been impaired for all their life, because we don't allow them to listen to what their body needs, and we tell them what they need to do because we think that what we tell them is what is better. um, so I think here, that is what I would probably comment on this, that they probably do have cognitive abilities that we are not always acknowledge. We don't acknowledge their cognitive abilities fully, and what their bodies might say or what they know better may not always be what we are asking of them, which means that we are and that is where it comes, right? Compliance to what we think is good for them, not what is actually good for them from their point of view, right? So that's authoritarian parenting. This is there is no contention here, right? Authoritative parenting is where I think I went down this bit of, I've seen a lot of people say gentle parenting and authoritative parenting is is the same thing. And people say that gentle parenting is just another word for authoritative parenting, and the more I read about it, the more I realize it's not the same. There is a nuanced difference, right? Humane hierarchy, lure, reward, and clicker training are the different kinds of training method. Now, when you talk about lure, reward, that itself should tell us that we are not fully respecting an individual if you're luring them to do something. um, I mean, there might be situations where we may need to use it, but when you do the risk benefit analysis of the situation. But it's important to remember that that's not gentle parenting at work. It is authoritative parenting. It is a form of getting the other individual to comply and do something that they are not fully ready to do yet, or do not want to do, or not something that their body needs at that point. Hallmarks of the methods focus on guidance, management of environment to mitigate behavior, reward of good choices. So, this is where I think gentle parenting is different from authoritative parenting. While uh, and we talk about this even in that other video of our rewards positive, that there's a lot of praise involved in gentle parenting, but it is praise irrespective of your dog's behavior, irrespective of who they are. So you accept your dog as the whole individual as they are right now, in this second, not what you expect of them, not what you think you can get them to do, but what they are today. And there's a lot of connection and appreciation and nurturing for who they are even today. I think the acceptance and acknowledgement for what they are right now is, I think, what sets this apart from reinforcement and reward based um, parenting. Expectations that parent owners should teach and guide towards proper choices. I think this is also a little different when it comes to human and dogs, right? And I think I spoke about this in one of the videos also on my Instagram, where I said that uh, when I feel like I am the expert for my dog, then I tell them what they need to do because I know better. But if I can respect the fact that my dog knows, and my uh, role is to support them and facilitate uh, them towards their needs, then it's very different, right? So I think respecting the other individual, understanding that they may know what they need, it's just about within the confines of safety and boundaries of safety. If my dog wants X versus Y, why not give it? Why not respect their choices? Why assume that we know better than them, right? So I think these are few things that are markers that are quite different, and I think that is where gentle parenting comes in. And there's a lot of like, if you look at the way, um, like if you are looking for like parallels as to, with gentle parenting, of course, you gentle parenting of dogs specifically, because we don't have a frame of reference for gentle parenting of dogs. um, you might want to look at gentle parenting of children, and there are quite a few good Instagram pages, Facebook pages that you can look up. A few of them I can name them if you're interested. There's one, responsive parenting, there is the gentle mama, there is meaningful ideas, if I remember correctly. These are all the page names on Instagram. There are a few in Indian contexts also. There's Maya Zama, there is Gota Haripriya, there is Amma Today. These are all people who talk about gentle parenting, where the child is respected as an individual of their own, with abilities of their own, while also exercising boundaries. So I think these are some great spaces to look at. Unfortunately, because gentle parenting, I don't think I have found papers on gentle parenting, but I think Dr. Mona Delahook talks about it in Beyond Behaviors, her book Beyond Behaviors. So you can have a look at that. There are a few other books. I will bring them up the next time we talk about this. So these are few resources you can access for a frame of reference for what is gentle parenting. You can also look at conversations on neurodiversity affirming care, because neurodiversity affirming care says that you respect this individual who might have a different worldview than and different lived experience than I have, and how can I facilitate the the care for them? How can I facilitate an environment for them? How can I facilitate a space for them where they can thrive? And when you think about it and when you look at it, the way that is approached neurodiversity affirming care, it's very similar to respecting an individual in gentle parenting of children or gentle parenting of dogs. So I think it's worth looking at these different spaces to find resources that might give us some frame of reference. Because I think, and I wanted to bring this up too, I will bring that up after a few comments are here, so I'll respond to that and I'll bring the next point up. I've seen gender parenting with my niece. The most interesting part is when the meltdown is happening, they teach them to use their words and express. I tried to use that with my dog and say, show me what you want. uh, I realized that when he points at something, responding immediately to the need allows us to mutually test whether it's what he wants. It's incredible. Absolutely. So it's very interesting because it helps to build almost a language, if you will, but I don't know if that's really gentle parenting. It is great because you're not hyper focused on behavior, right? You're trying to look at what is this individual trying to tell me, what is the need that's unmet, and how can I meet the need, uh, and how can I show up for my dog. And I think those are the basic crux of relationship. I talk about it here: trust, respect, understanding, empathy. So I think that is how a true gentle parenting relationship is built. uh, I did this with Zoe too. So in the last year or so, she's having this particular behavior of getting a little agitated in the evenings. It was very weird because she's right now sleeping under my table, uh, unmoved, and she's been here for the entire duration plus about half an hour or 45 minutes prior to that, and she's asleep here, which is very interesting, very not usual of her. But she tends to start getting agitated, and we would have a few markers of what she's trying to tell us. So if she's kind of pawing at her bowl, it could be food, like she's hungry. But it's also important, like how I mentioned at the beginning of the live, that emotional eating could also be one of the ways that our dogs you know uh, like ask for food. It may not always be hunger, it could just be emotional eating. So it's worth also figuring out whether food has some stress associated to it. But yes, we will, if she's hungry, if she's asking for food, we would do that. um, some, Sometimes after giving food also she's not like resting, so we then wonder if it's connection needs. We then wonder if it's need for some kind of stimulation, because she's also a dog who needs she's very smart, she is a hugely intelligent dog. And I have fallen short of being able to meet her intelligence needs. But if she has that high needs for for using her smartness, then we also have to create spaces where we can do that for her. So these are various things that we would like do trial and error. And that's the thing, right? You're not trying to solve a behavior, you're trying to solve a situation, you're trying to address a situation. And from one day to another, from one situation to another, things might change. Today she could be asking for food, tomorrow she could be asking for connection. It's more about meeting the need. So I mean, this is interesting also, and I think this is where people will question my credibility as a professional. But I am not focused on solving my dog's behaviors, because the behavior is communication to me, uh, and behavior is information to me. So I'm not here as a caregiver to solve behaviors. I'm here to solve situations and meet any needs that my dog has. So if you look at it that way, the needs never go away. You have needs as an individual for your entire lifetime. um, You could be having connection needs, you could be having nutrition needs, you could be having resting needs, you could be having health concerns that requires, us to um, have a look at. You could be having attachment needs, it could be social needs. There could be so many needs, and you have needs till you are alive. So you're meeting the needs as per the situation, as per the requirements, and that is how you build connection. We are not looking at solving a behavior, extinguishing a behavior. Of course, we are trying to get our dogs to be as safe as they can be, but it's more about addressing the needs. And I think that is probably where gentle parenting kind of stands apart from the other parenting styles. I don't know. Am I making sense? Do you have any questions? Do you have any thoughts about this? I hope you got the name of the paper. I think it's here. Let me just put it up again. Thank you for sharing the name of the paper for others to also have a look at. Um, Dogs are not robots. Needs change incredibly often, and I've only seen it after focus on listening. You're not listening. Great book. I'll have a look at it. I will check that book. Um, so yes, they have changing needs. They might have needs different from that of the next dog, right? So no two dogs might have the same needs either. So I think it's worth thinking about all of this as well. The final thing, maybe I won't talk about it in detail today, but I want you to like think about it. You can also Google it. There are enough resources outside, I think, about it. So when I was just, I mean, I keep coming across posts and thoughts and, reflections and ideas shared by people on all of these dog parent, I mean, not dog parenting, just parenting pages and neurodiversity pages. And there was one thought that I felt like was very interesting because I couldn't immediately decipher what was being said. And they said that there is a difference between being safe and feeling safe. Do you get it? Do you know what might be the difference between being safe and feeling safe? And what are we choosing? Are we choosing to be safe or to feel safe? Any thoughts about this? If you have any. Wow, we have gone 1.5 hours today, and all of you have stuck throughout. So thank you. If you're watching all the way till here, then you stayed for about 1.5 hours of this live, and I am glad you are here. Um, I'll wait. You can share. I know. There's a character limit for every comment in the live chat. Unfortunately, you can leave multiple comments. Don't worry about it. I will read it in order. In the meantime, if any of you have any questions, any thoughts, any ideas, this mirror image is quite distracting. I am lifting my right hand, but it's showing up on my left side. So it's a bit disorienting for me. Be safe, immediate physical safety. Okay. Feel safe, emotional security. Interesting. And is there, do we choose one over the other, or uh, feeling safe is personal and from the perspective of the individual? So they could technically be safe but not feel it. Love it. Okay. Feeling safe is more important. Great. Okay. So, I haven't gone down the rabbit hole here, and Chandni will get the reference. But I did go through a few places where people have spoken about this, and it is exactly what um you mentioned, right? Sometimes we feel unsafe even though we are safe. And I feel like in the dog world and in the dog behavior world, dog training world, dog parenting world, there's a lot of conversation around being safe. You give them food, you give them shelter, you give them space to rest, and you're not actively, visibly causing harm. And the assumption is the dog is safe. But there is a difference between being safe, which is, as you rightly said, physical safety, versus feeling safe, which is a state of being. Am I feeling safe right this second? Uh, yes, I am in a safe space, not just physically, but also emotionally, in my environment, with the people I am around. Uh, yes, ask me how I was feeling in the same space, but 10 days back, I was not feeling safe in my own house, but there was so much happening in the environment, uh, in the environment, in the space, social space, that I was not feeling safe. um, Even though I was in the same space, around the same people, but there was some change in the environment around that period that caused a change in safety. I'll come to this. Just let me finish the being safe and feeling safe part of it, and then I'll come to this question. So I think, every time we are looking at our dogs, I, have you heard this argument about people saying that when they use shock collar or choke collar or prong collar, it doesn't hurt them, so it doesn't cause physical harm to them, so it's okay. Um I think that's a good example to think about when you're talking about being safe and feeling safe, because technically, uh, unless they have been choked to a very high degree, or unless they are poked with prong collars to a very high degree, or unless they are shocked to a very high degree, technically they might just be physically safe. Nothing has happened to them. They probably don't yelp, which is why these people are saying that your dog is safe. But what is happening is that in that situation, in that environment, the dog is not feeling safe. And it becomes so difficult to gauge this, if we don't know how to read dogs. One, second is if we can't empathize with their situation. Third is if we can't respect our dogs as individuals and know, again, look at behaviors as what are the underlying reasons for the behavior. So I think um, it's important to think about psychological safety. It's also environmental safety. You could be around the people that you feel the most safe with, but still be in a space, an environment that you don't feel safe about. um, and I feel like both physical safety and emotional safety are important, but unfortunately we stop our discussion at physical safety. So if your dog is not in visible harm, and physical harm, uh, we assume that they're safe. And I think it's worth thinking about this a lot more, talking about this a lot more, and what really feeling safe is about. Uh, are there times when you feel safe, and when you don't feel safe, but you're physically safe? I think these are important conversations to have, and also how our behaviors are in these different situations, what our environment is like in these situations, what our social, setup is in these situations. Just give me 1 second. Sorry. Zoe finally woke up and she needs to be let out. So I was just okay. Okay, I do have a question that's unrelated to our current discussion. In your research into parenting, do you find it challenging to translate that to your dog? Examples. I think the one thing that I found the most, like two things rather, I think, which is the most challenging when you're translating to dogs is in gentle parenting. Um, there's conversation. There's a lot of conversation where you want to express your intent to your child, and your child responds with a feedback of what they're saying. There's a conversation happening there. uh, Even when you want to repair a broken trust in a particular situation, you can go up to your child and talk and have a dialogue there. um, I'm not saying that we don't have a space to communicate with our dogs. We can definitely communicate, but because there is not active dialogue in form of conversations, we don't always know how to articulate to our dogs certain things, or how to speak to them in a way they may understand. I think that has been a little difficult to kind of translate into dogs. um, but I think if we show up for our dogs, if we still have the dialogue irrespective, um, we may have some kind of feedback from them anyway. So I think that's quite interesting and it's worth thinking about. um, the other thing that I found difficult, I thought of a second thing too. I not able to. I do have these moments of complete brain freeze. There was a second thing that I felt like it's difficult to translate to our dogs. Um, if it comes back to me, I'll share. But one definite, the biggest one is actually having a dialogue uh, for our dogs, to know what our intention is, to tell them what our intention is, to hear from them what we're hoping for. I think that is probably the hardest to translate, but it's not impossible. We know that our dogs tend to respond to our body language. We can kind of read their body language too. We can um, it's a bit of a trial and error when we are trying to meet their needs, like how you also mentioned with your dog and I also mentioned with Zoe. But it's still doable. It's not impossible, but that's probably the hardest. Only the dog gets to decide. Any assumption on both be and feel safe is moved when it comes to ourselves. The dog is stripped of choice already when used. Exactly. I think not having choice is a big part of not feeling safe, right? If And I think that is what I was feeling about 10 days back. If you were to ask me about psychological safety or feeling safe, I felt like I had no choice, even though it seemed like I had choice. And I think that's also a hard discussion to have, because what does choice look like, and who gets to say whether they have choice or not? Um, I think that's also an important one to think about. And uh, with ourselves, as you rightly said, the dogs already don't have a choice. They don't have a choice on what equipment is being used on them, and they don't have a choice to voice it out either, whether they are comfortable or not about it. So I think I agree that only the individual in question can say whether they're feeling safe and being safe. Um, and when there is no choice, you already have taken away the possibility of them feeling safe and being safe too. What if they want to walk away from a situation and they're cornered into being in that situation, and they don't feel physically safe about it either, so they don't think they are safe either. um, so I think it's a fair thing to think about, and it's a great point that you've made. So yes, I think being safe and feeling safe was the other thing that I wanted to bring up. This is something that we don't talk about much in our dog you know field, dog behavior, dog parenting field. So I think it's a good time to probably end the live. I would encourage you to like the video if you enjoyed the conversation we had today. If you are only if you missed the initial part of the video and joined a little later, do go back and we had a great conversation around counter surfing. So do check that out. Share it with people that you think might find this interesting or helpful. I did mention about the handbook, the puppy guide. If any of you need it, if you want to share it with your clients, if you want to share it with people DM me. We will figure out. I can share a coupon code that you can share it with your circle. um, what else? I spoke about active avoidance that we will talk about in the next session, if required. um, do subscribe to the channel so you know when I come live. The other thing before I end, are you liking these weekly lives? Do you want me to change the format a little bit in any way or not? We have done about four now, so I'd like some kind of feedback. Are you enjoying this? Is this good for you? Are you okay with it going how long it goes? Like today, we were at 1 hour 45 minutes. Or would you like 1 hour? Would you like to break it into two different lives in a week? What are your thoughts? Why don't you share some of it with me? If you'd like to share that now, you can leave a comment. If you want to reach out, um, you know, if you want to reach out via DM and then have a discussion with me, we can do that too. Um, thank you. I'm enjoying this too. I'm enjoying like coming up here and then sharing my thoughts here. Um, there was a conversation in our second live, I think. If you've not seen, do go back to that and then have a look at it, where I spoke about acknowledgement versus appreciation. There were a couple of questions that people asked me about that, and I want to address it in the next one. But for that, I had to give you context about what was that topic. So if you have not already seen it, do go back, have a look at it, and we can come back in the next live and talk about it a little more. And the other thing that I would probably leave you with, um, is a thought on what do you think about disobedience from your dogs? Like, how does that make you feel? And how would you address it? Does it need to be addressed? How do you address it? And how does that make you feel? Have a thought, I mean, reflect on this, think about it, and come back in the next live and we will chat about that too. And maybe I'll bring up a few more questions that I come across, and we can chat about that. Anything else that you want me to talk about? If you have particular topics that you want me to cover, please, feel free to let me know. DM me on any of my social media. I think I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram. You can reach out to me on either of those places, and you can let me know. And we can talk about it in the next time. If you have any thoughts, any feedback about how these lives are going on, then do share that too. uh, I'm not rigid on the format. In fact, um, at some point I'd like to start bringing you people on the call and then have a conversation. So tell me if you're up for it, if you'd love to come on and have a discussion together. You don't need to be on video. We can try only audio. If you're not comfortable coming on video too, we can still do that as well. Uh, and yeah, maybe one two topics in a live might help if they're longer topics. Exactly. In fact, I didn't expect the counter surfing topic to go that long. But I am completely. I mean, what we have done 1 hour 45 minutes, and I'm still okay, not feeling overworked. But maybe if it happens repeatedly, maybe it is worth splitting into two different days. I don't know how many people will turn up for multiple days a week, so I'm still doing it. Um, you know I'm doing it once a week for now. Uh, but let's see. I mean, I would love to have people come over on calls. Let's talk about topics that you're interested in. And to be honest, I may not know everything. And that's the thing, right? We're all learning. We're all on our learning journeys. There might be topics that you bring up that I might just need to go and then research about and come back. Like, I think the puppy and the mother conversations that we had today, and I'm happy to go and then look up research on that. But there are conversations about it in different spaces. So I am only here sharing my ideas, my thoughts, and my lived experience. And I realize that not a lot of people are aware that not a lot of people are aware that there can be another lived experience where a human and a dog are coexisting without training. And I feel like that is an experience I can very authoritatively share because I live that life. And I feel like if someone feels that they can look at this and then feel inspired or encouraged to do that too with their dogs, then I'm here for it. um, Keeping dogs brain's busy, mind gets bored easy. Great, I will put this up on my list of things, and as we go through the lives, I will bring them up as well. If you feel like you see something that is being spoken in terms of dog behavior and you want me to react to it, respond to it, talk about it, feel free to share it with me, and I will do that too. Um, and I'm happy to have all of you listening to me. I am grateful to have a community of people who'd like to listen to what I have to say, and hope this community just keeps growing from here. So I think on that note, it's a good idea to end the live. To all of you who stayed all the way till the end, thank you. Do like the video, share it, subscribe to my channel, and I will see you next week during the next live. Thank you. Have a good day and a good night, depending on where you are joining from. Bye.